So who am I? I call myself a quality on time coach or just a project coach, and I help teams and organizations to optimize performance. Because most people think their performance is great. Usually they only ask me when things get really bad. So then we call it project rescue. Today I'm going to talk about an example of a space project which was delivered on time. And with BCS, we'll talk about IT people mainly. I don't know who's here, but what I'm going to tell is not just about space, it's not just about system engineering, but it's as much about IT, because I've done coaching, electronic products, firmware, software, industrial control, road, rail, telecom, anything, because it's all humans doing these projects. And I call it also result management, because the results pay salaries. And actually, sometimes I still have the chance to design an actually electronic product, because that's my background. And this was the last product I was allowed to design. So I had been working with one client and they were happy with me. And at their 25th birthday, they said, Niels, we make a seminar and can you tell what you taught us? So I was there, I had a webinar just like this one. And then after that, a guy came to me and he said, Niels, we have to talk because we are running a project and we know we will be late because all our projects are late and we don't want to be late. We can't afford to be late because when the money is up, there is no more. So I went there, and what was the project? Some Earth observation instrument where they measure the gases that are emitted by the industry, by nature, by whatever. And interesting thing is, very experienced system engineers were working there. I didn't have to teach them about requirements. They knew how to do that. I'll show an example of the requirements, which I found on the internet, actually. That's why I dare to show it. A 6-year pure waterfall project. Now, some of you may think you're an agilist. And what is a waterfall project interesting for us? Well, these projects for space, when the requirements are there, they don't even know how exactly to do this. So the first half of such a project is just finding out how to make the impossible possible. And then the second half of the project is building the actual instrument for launch. So usually they don't exactly, when they start, they don't know where they'll end up. There was only one problem. They missed all deadlines. And as I said before, the guy said, there is one bag of money, and if the money is up, we have to pay it ourselves as a company. So can you help? Well, I went there, and 9 weeks later, I spent 15 of my days there. 9 weeks later, and since then, they haven't missed any deadline. Actually, the guy said at the end of the project, Niels, we didn't succeed. We expected to be at least 1 year late, but sorry, we delivered 1 day early before the deadline. Well, that's 40 man-year plus a lot of European subcontractors saving 1 year of work. Isn't that interesting? But how did they do that? And again, you can say we don't do space, but it doesn't matter. The things I'm going to tell you work in any project. Now, I was first talking to the CTO, and he thought, well, this sounds interesting. But then I said, don't put me on the training budget, because usually that's what they do if I don't tell them. don't put me on the training budget because the training budget is limited. And when the money is up, the money is up. And I'm competing with other trainings. So I said, put me as a coach on the project budget, because then the project is responsible for getting at least as much benefit than they have to pay me. So then the CTO said, well, okay, that's a great idea. But now you have first to convince the project manager, because he will be being paid out of his budget. So I went to the project manager, and he said, actually, almost everybody in the project at some time said me this, Niels, we are doing this kind of projects for 27 years. I'll have to stop my noise. We have been doing this kind of project for 27 years. We are very good at it. How do you think you can add something to that? Which is a relevant question, right? But I have a trick there. I said, okay, let's do an exercise with you. Is there anything you have to deliver by the end of the week? Oh yeah, a status report. Now we can say whether a status report is useful to do, but don't do everything at once. So I said, okay, you have to produce a status report to tell management how the project is going. How much time do you need for that? About 2 hours. Okay. What do you still have to do? Well, I have to get the status of 6 team leads. Okay. How do you get that status from these 6 people? Do you send an email? Yes, I send them an email. Okay. Do they always reply immediately to the email? No. So how much time do you need for these 6 people, for every person? You send an email, a reminder, you have to go there because still you don't get an answer. Then you get the report. And you check once more and you compile into your own report. How much is that per person on average? Idea? About 1.5 hours. Okay, interesting. 6 times 1.5 is 9 hours. How much time do you have available this week? Project manager said, I'm very busy. I said, I don't ask whether you're busy or not. I said, how much time do you have available for the status report? So I looked in his calendar and he said, 4 hours. I said, okay, you have 4 hours available. You need about 9 hours. So at this moment, we already know that you're going to fail. And then comes the magic mantra, what are we going to do about it? Now you can imagine that this project manager now wanted to get rid of me. So he said, you go to the project and make sure they deliver on time. So I was allowed in. So the project manager was on top of this project, but he was working outside. And the system engineer was actually running the project technically as an architect and as an organizer. And we had a team, mechanical team, electrical team, interface team, thermal team, optical team, quality team. Altogether, some 40 engineers with a lot of subcontractors across Europe, because that is how European Space Agency works. So the project system engineer, he said, well, we have a lot of issues. Many interdependent deadlines. Now, I showed them this picture where this is a whiteboard, where here is some deadline, and there were several elements that were contributing to this result, and how we did that. So it's not the first time that some people have many interdependent deadlines. Many unforeseen issues resulting in significant changes. Where have you heard that before? delay declared unacceptable by the customer, the launch date of the spacecraft is fixed, and the money is fixed. Team overstressed, no clear focus, and everything is 80% complete, nothing 100%. It was about halfway the project. Okay, now I have a whole toolbox of things that we can use. And some people call that evolutionary project management. It's a term I learned from Tom Gilp, who also talks a lot at BCS. And that is many elements I have in my toolbox. The plan, do, check, act. That's the Deming cycle. I'll talk about it. Zero defects as an attitude. And that's what I will be talking about next month, 27th of June at BCS. The business case says, why are we going to improve what? Requirements engineering says, what are we going to improve and what not? Because remember, any project is about improving something. I mean, the functional delivery is what people already do, or in this case, there were already instruments going around the Earth, observing the Earth. So this was just to be an observation instrument that did even better. So how much will we improve? That's the quantification. Architecture and design, selecting the optimum compromise for the conflicting requirements. Early review and inspection. And what I added to what I learned from Tom Gilp is what I call Evo project planning. It's a weekly task cycle, a bi-weekly delivery cycle, and timeline for longer periods of time. Because these guys knew about requirements, I didn't have to tell anything about that. My focus was in getting it planned better. The business case is why are we doing the project? Requirements engineering, what, how much, and are we done? Architecture and design is how to do it. Early review and inspection is check as early as possible. Weekly task cycle is to optimize the efficiency. The bi-weekly delivery cycle to optimize the effectiveness of what we do. And timeline, there we see what is going to happen and what will we do about it. That latter is there in red because you probably also have the experience that usually if you make a timeline, you will see that things take longer than you have. So what will happen and what are we going to do about it? And the interesting thing is we can do usually a lot about it because otherwise I wouldn't be needed there. It's about the right result at the right time. And I call that quality on time. Just quickly about the PDCA cycle or the Shewhart cycle, Deming cycle, plan, do, study, act, or Kaizen, whatever. Plan, do, check, act. Doing is not a problem, we do it every day, right? But I call this the intuitive cycle, and I don't call it plan, do, I call it PLDO. PLDO, PLDO, PLDO. We do something, and then we think, what's the next thing we have to do? And we already start doing it. What's the next thing? We already start doing it. So not really planning, just pull. Now, if intuition would be perfect, everything we do this way would be perfect, right? Now, not everything we do is perfect. Apparently, intuition sometimes points us in the wrong direction. So instead of just doing the intuitive cycle, let's plan what we want to achieve and how to achieve it. What and how. Then we carry out the plan. And then in the check cycle, we can say, is the result according to plan and the way we achieve the result according to plan, the product and the project. And then in the act cycle, we think, what are we going to do differently? And in the check, we check, was the result okay? Can we do it even better? Was it not okay? How can we do it better? And in the act phase, we decide what to do differently. Because if we do nothing differently, the result the next time will be the same, right? So that's actually the thing that's often missing. People do check, maybe not formally, but people know that the result is good or not so good. But what are we going to do about it? Another element I mentioned in my toolbox was the requirements. Well, I found this from the Meteorological Agency on the internet. I don't think it's there anymore, but I found the requirement document as an example how a requirement document should look like, with numerical values in the minimum acceptable and what they hope to achieve. Minimum acceptable and what they hope to achieve. Minimum acceptable, what they hope to achieve. And this range requirements give the designers a way to optimize the result. Actually, I heard that in some of these things, they came out to 7 by 7 kilometer pixels for Earth observation. So, because these system engineers were very good at requirements engineering and the requirements were done very well, I didn't have to teach them anything about that. So I was focusing on the planning stuff. In my planning, I use task cycles, delivery cycles, and timeline. Delivery is what are we going to deliver to get feedback from the stakeholders to see whether we are doing the right things. Tasks are things we give ourselves, so we don't give tasks to other people. People just design tasks for themselves, how to contribute to the successful delivery to stakeholders. And this weekly and this bi-weekly. And then timeline, we get deliveries every 2 weeks or less. So this week we will work on some tasks for the current delivery. Some things to deliver take a little bit longer, but this is dangerous because it shouldn't take too long to work, because then maybe the goal of the delivery has changed because of what we learned on the timeline, and then we may have done tasks that should have been differently. So in the weekly task cycle, we check every week, are we doing the right things in the right order to the right level of detail for now? Optimizing estimation, planning, and tracking abilities to better predict the future. And we select the highest priority tasks, never do any lower priority tasks, never do undefined tasks. And some managers don't understand this immediately, but there are only 26 plannable hours in a week. And that's what we take 2/3 of normal 40 or 39 hours, depending how much hours do you have in a week. In the rest of the time, you're not going on holiday, but you do all the other things you will do anyway. Anything you do anyway in a project, you don't have to plan because it happens anyway. So why waste time planning it? Like going to the loo, drinking coffee, helping each other, planning, emails, phone calls, whatever. You don't know what happens exactly. You don't know when it happens, but you know it will happen. But we give it a 1/3 of the time box, so that you still have 2/3 of the time available for the actual work that has to be done. And any task you define will be done 100% done. Every week we plan individually, and remember the trick I played with the project manager. How much time do I have available? 2/3 of the available time is the plannable time. What's most important to do? We estimate how much time we individually need to do this. So we don't plan as a team how much time it takes for the team. No, we do it individually, because if individuals don't know how to gauge their effort, how can a team ever do that? So, which most important things fit in the net available time? In this case, it means these tasks will be done by the end of the week, and these will not. Yeah, but it also must be done. I know, but we already know it won't. So what can I do? What am I going to do? And what am I not going to do? At least 1 week earlier, you already know that these things won't yet be done. Then we have the weekly planning. Individually, this is optimizing efficiency. So individually, people think, what do I have to do to contribute to the success of the delivery? What time do I need to do that successfully? How much time do I have available? Actually, I have to go to the dentist next one day, so I don't have 40 hours, so I have less time, and we take 2/3 of that. Then we have the modulation with a coach. When I start, that's me, but that's just to help each other not to take shortcuts. So every week with somebody, we think, is everything done? Is it completely done? Not to think about it anymore. Priority task, are the new things really the most important things? Is it possible? Does it fit? And we have an individual plan. And then we have a team meeting where everybody says, I think I'm going to do this to contribute to the success. Next guy, this. Next girl, this. And in that process, people can say, hey, what you're going to do, that's not possible. Hey, don't you forget this. Hey, you need me for this kind of thing, and it's not in my planning. So we modulate the planning based on the synergy in the group. And what we try to do here is optimizing this efficiency. Individually, we prepare, because modulation of your plan costs less time than generation of the plan. So here, first we discuss it one-on-one, and then we discuss it with a group. And some people say, isn't this planning very time-consuming, doing all these things? Well, I measured it in many projects, and it's basically 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes. So about 1 hour per person. Okay, so now you have some idea about how I start with this. And here was the first guy coming in the first one-on-one. He said, oh, there's awful schedule pressure. We are so busy, management lets us do too much in too little time. I said, okay, what's the problem? We have in 3 weeks a meeting with subcontractors. And the subcontractors send a lot of documents. We have to check whether they are right with our total design. So many documents we have to review. So in 2 weeks, we have to have reviewed all these documents, send our results back to the subcontractors so that they have a week to rectify anything. And then we have our official meeting, project meeting. So impossible deadline, only 2 weeks to review. I said, how many documents? How much time does it take to review a document? Sure, I don't know exactly. Okay, let's look at the facts. How many documents do you have to review? Well, they had this matrix of many documents, and apparently this was Paul, but because he was going to review 7 documents in these 2 weeks. So how much time per document? Some take long, some are short. I said, well, after some discussion, he said, okay, I have 4 heavy documents and 3 easy documents. How much time per heavy document? Well, about 15 hours. Easy document, about 2 hours. Okay. Add them up, 60 plus 6 is 66 hours. Anything else you have to do in these 2 weeks? Blah, 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 33 hours. Okay. In 2 weeks, there is, for me, 19-hour work to do. Well, how much do you have available the coming 2 weeks? Well, remember my standard, 26 hours plannable time per week, 2 weeks, 52. So we already know what's going to happen, and now at least we know why it is impossible, why it seems impossible. So I give some suggestions. I said, what kind of documents? Yeah, one document is a requirements document of one of the suppliers, where the supplier is telling what they are going to deliver, what the requirements based on which requirements they're going to deliver. I said, what's the problem? Why do you need 15 hours for that? Well, in the first draft, it was so bad that I had to go through all this and do a lot of rectification and send that back to them. And probably this time it won't be better either. I said, okay, so you're going to spend 15 hours of a document that probably is not good. And after the 15 hours needs a lot of rectifications, right? He said, yeah, probably. I said, well, how about instead of spending 15 hours, first spend 1 hour, and if you think it's still very bad, just take the plane, go to Sweden, and sit next to the guy and discuss how it should look like. So I just gave an example and some more suggestions to all the other people who came after him. What was the result after this picture? 3 weeks later, I heard that a great meeting, all documents were reviewed, and everybody was happy. So how did this work? The interesting thing was, these were very good engineers. So a few suggestions were enough to get them out of their stress, busyness, and think about how am I going to organize this? And that's the thing I learned with these guys, with good engineers. All I had to do to tell these guys was that you don't only design the product, but you also design the project. And then engineers know how to do it. And one of the things I show here that is a problem often in this project is that they have reviews with suppliers and another review with suppliers and another review with suppliers. And the problem is, if there's problems after that, there is rework and extra work. So my suggestion was, why at the review, the thing shouldn't be bad anymore. It should be right. So why not, as I suggested to this guy, go to Sweden, take the plane, go to Sweden. Why not sit with the guy and do some cycles with them to make sure that they know what they're talking about? Anyway, we have not so much time here. So the third element of the planning is the timeline. How do we know that we do and get what is needed when it is needed? Standard projects usually say, okay, all we think we have to do with the people we have and the material we have, add some contingency, and then everything is done. There's only one problem. Usually the deadline is earlier, right? Now, some people say, yes, but we are agile. We know how to handle this. Okay, so in agile, we're doing our best to deliver working software, and deadlines and fatal dates, that's management bullshit. So we are just working and doing our best. Okay, well, fatal date is a fatal date. So what do we in this way of working? We say, if this is the deadline, this surely will be done. This surely will not be done. And this may be done because estimation is not exact science. And as long as the most important things will be done and the bells and whistles that actually nobody needs are not done, everybody will be happy. It's better to have 80% 100% done than 100% 80% done, but it must be the most important 80%, right? But even more important, if you focus on the deadlines, on the end deadline, you will probably go over it. So even more important are starting deadlines. What is the last date to start something to make sure you finish before the end deadline? The minimum time to finish the job. Because every day we start later, we already know we will be a day after the fatal date. And again, I did that with another project on the whiteboard. The interesting thing was with this picture was I went there and the next week the picture was still there. And the project manager said, I have to put this in the computer. I said, why? To show top management at the high floor. I have to go there and have a nice presentation. I said, can't we get them down here? No, we have, if we show this, they will laugh about it and they don't believe us anymore. I said, well, why not? I put some chairs in front of the whiteboard and I said, you call these guys and let them come down to your room. Okay, 5 minutes later, they were sitting there and he explained what we did here, how dirty it looked, doesn't matter, but it was clear enough, he could explain. And they looked at it and said, oh, good work, continue the good work. And they left. So I said, why waste your time, put it in a nice picture in the computer if this is sufficient? And of course, every week you check, are we still on track? And you react to whatever is necessary. So what are the options if you see that you're not going to make it on time? Because there is, in history, we can't work. We have done something, good or bad, whatever. We can't change that anymore. Only from now, we can create value before the deadline. If the needed time is much less than the available time, we could just start working. If the needed time is actually the same as the available time, well, we probably need more, so we have to do something about it. And if we see that the needed time is more than the available time, it's not okay anyway. So we look at the value still to earn versus the time still available. And when I made this picture years ago, the first time, this latest bar was extending behind the fatal date. Well, I thought, if the match is over, we can't score a goal. So it means we should have started earlier. But failure is not an option. What are we going to do about it? Now, we see people having many ways of dealing with this. And I made a list of the options we have to solve this problem. Failure is not an option. We see we don't have enough time. We are too busy, not enough time. What are we going to do about it? And first, I want to show you what I call the deceptive options. What options do we think we have? Which options do you see people do in projects if the time is tough? Well, you may have seen this one, hoping for the best. We know it's impossible, but we hope that maybe things will get better anyway. Well, you know what will happen. The other one is, we have to be on time, so let's go for it. That's the macho one. Well, if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. Does anybody of you work overtime at any time? Well, working overtime is fooling yourself and your boss, because if you work overtime, you get more tired than normal. If you get more tired, you make more mistakes than normal. And in the end, you're only working overtime to rectify the mistakes you made because you were tired from working overtime. So never, ever work overtime, so that once or twice a year, you have the energy to do it when it is really necessary. The fourth deceptive options, which also works counterproductive, like these first three, is moving the deadline. Some may have heard about Parkinson's law. Work expands to fill the time for its completion, or shorter, people spend the time available. So if there is no deadline, people spend the time. So if I don't get the deadline, we make our own deadline, because then we are more efficient. The student syndrome is the other side of the same medal. Remember when you, as a student, had to do an exam? When did you start working hard to learn for the exam? 3 weeks before or the night before? So human behavior let people do these things, but they don't work. But intuitively, it's so strong. Intuition often guides us in the wrong direction. So what are alternatives to this that may work? Now, the fifth option is adding people. Usually I say, okay, let's open a can of programmers. Then we add more programmers or more engineers, and then we do more. Well, the idea is that if you take 6 people in 2 months, you can do it with 4 people in 3 months and 2 people in 6 months. So intuitively, people and time is constant. And Brooks called this the myth of the 1 month. Brooks' law, adding people to a late project makes it later. Why? Because the project is late, new people are there, they have to learn what the whole project is about. We have to teach them, they have to start thinking about it, so it only takes longer. And actually, it's not just adding people to a late project, it's even adding people to a project may make it later. And that's what Putnam measured. He measured projects that already were done, so they couldn't tamper the numbers anymore. So he found that the cheapest project is 2 people. But the fastest project is 3 to 5 people. It's a little bit more costly, but it may be an economic optimum here because time to market is economically important in many cases. Some people want to be even faster. We call that the 9 mothers area, where some people think you take 9 mothers to make a baby in 1 month. And if you have more than 7, 8 people, then the project explodes because it takes longer and you have to pay more people. Now, then you can ask, of course, how can you ever design an airplane? Because you need a little bit more people. Well, that's the challenge. You will have to work with this and find a way. So what is the way? And that's saving time. How to be on time is to save time. We don't have enough time, but we can save time without negatively affecting the result. Isn't that interesting? By the efficiency in what we do, why we do it, for who we do it, doing the right things, not doing what later proves to be superfluous. Half what people do in their work proves later not to be necessary. If you can see half of that half before you spend the time, you already save 25% of your time. Efficiency in how we do it, doing things differently, not using the first hunch how to solve a problem, but to think is an alternative way that's more efficient to solve this problem. In the product, we can do it. In the project, I showed with the weekly task cycle, the bi-weekly delivery cycle, and the timeline, that we can also optimize the efficiency there. Continuous improvement, plan to check act all the time. And when we do it in the right order. Some people start with the easy part of the work, and then when the easy part is done, they still have to do the difficult part. The difficult part wasn't that difficult, but now the easy parts, based on what the result of the difficult part, the easy things have to be redone because they had to be done a little bit differently. So we wasted some time. And time boxing. Time boxing, having deadlines on the short periods of time. That's why we have these tasks. Time boxing is more efficient than feature boxing. Feature boxing I call if there is no deadline. Wait until it's ready. Parkinson's law. We spend the time available. All that is, you may have heard that in the context of lean, as some people call it, continuous elimination of waste all the time. So did it work for this space project? And again, the system engineer told me later, when it was successful, 2 months needed to get the process in full swing. Well, that was my 9 weeks. I was there 9 weeks, 15 days in total to teach 40 people. First, the system engineer with his team, and then the teams with the team leads who already understood because they already did it with the project leader. Everything was done on time, stress level reduced. Well, the problem with stress is it costs energy, but it's not productive. So if you can reduce the stress, you can use the energy productively. Time saved. I asked the system engineer, this guy, do you still have time with all this planning with all these people to do your architectural work? Oh yes, much better, he said, because there are less problems, so we can do much better work. And he said, people not in this way of working, they lag behind, so they have to follow. Would it be a company standard? He said yes. So this is his text from an email he sent to me. And actually, he has done more projects where he used the same technique. Now, why did it take still long, before the thing was launched? Because there was this fixed deadline, and if you're not on time, you have to be back in line, and maybe you have to wait another year before you can launch again. So he told me, because every time I told this story, I've been telling this story at various places, and every time I saw, hey, it's still not launched. Why? So he said, well, there's something that even this Evo technique doesn't work. The launch software was from Ukraine, bought by ESA 5 years ago, and to be used in Russia because that's the launch place. Now, this is before Russia invaded Ukraine, but by now we can understand even better why that could have been a problem. He said incomprehensibly that was a bit more difficult than it was 5 years earlier. But he said by now problems seem to have been solved. This was one time an email he sent to me, and the launch was planned in March, April. And later I found on the website August. And later I found on the website finally launched in October 2017. And at this moment, this Earth observation instrument is producing a lot of interesting stuff. And he added in his email, when I asked him, coincidentally, I just today introduced our Evo way of working to a new team member of our current project. And I wanted to show you what his current project was, mapping the large-scale structure of the universe over a cosmic time covering the last 10 billion years. These guys do interesting things, don't they? And he added, I'm curious to find out how quickly she'll get the idea. So this guy has been, he wrote back to me what he thought I was doing with his team. And we discussed that. And clever as he was, he could take over. And I always say, the quicker they get rid of me, the better I did my work. So that was, in the limited time of a webinar, a story about quality on time. Of course, there are much more between the lines, but I hope you get some idea that there is hope if you think that there is not enough time and that the deadlines are impossible. Often they are not.